Simmons. I'm President and CEO of the Chester County Community Foundation. Welcome to our annual Board Institute at a new bat time in a new bat place. I am pleased to introduce you to our host for the most and the chair of our board. This is Dr. Zebulun Davenport.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and we are certainly glad that you all have chosen to spend this evening here at this is Westchester University Foundation, but it is for the Community Foundation. And we're certainly glad you're here. Your presence indicates that you all care as much about the community as we do. And many of you know that our mission is connecting people who care with causes that matter. That is the Westchester Community Foundation's mission, but you can adopt it for this evening. Don't take it and write it down for your mission, but know, you could, yeah. But know that we know that you all believe the same. And so we just thank you for being here and spending some time with us. And our hope is that you walk away not only feeling enriched, but as you participate, communicate, and work with others, that we all leave better than what we came. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. Now, hold on. I know how much people like to talk, so give me just a couple minutes to tell you a bit about the Community Foundation, and then Zeb is going to lead you through a good discussion before we get to our plenary session with Robbe Healey. So, how many of you have been to one of our board institutes in the past? If you have, I'm going to say 65%. What do you think, Zeb? Sounds right? Thank you. So basically, we wanted to change up the date and the time and the place to make it a little easier, and I think we have, because it's a great turnout tonight as well. And we're going to stay all in this room. Our housekeeping is easy. Eat, drink, and take your own breaks whenever you need them, all right? Because there's no formal breaks throughout the evening. And thank you for hosting us in this beautiful space, too, as well. So at the Community Foundation, Zeb told you our mission, connecting people who care with causes that matter, so your legacies make a difference now and forever. There's almost 1,000 community foundations in the world, so over 900 in the US. And we were founded in 1994 by some Dynasts families. You can see their photos up there. And now we have 15 board members and a good group of staff and volunteers. We're a collection of about over 400 funds under one umbrella. And a lot of those are donor-advised family funds, and a good portion are nonprofit endowment funds. And right now we hold about $136 million in entrusted funds under our umbrella. And from that, we grant out money annually, about $6 to $7 million a year at this point, which is pretty good, and more to come. And I wanted to talk to you about the foundation so that you as board members know what services you could take advantage of. Part of it is we really like to convene and understand community issues and be a repository for what's going on, especially in these important times. So understanding the civic and this charitable landscape is huge. And for the families whose funds we hold in trust, we're the ones who come and do site visits at your nonprofits and take a look at your 990s and your Guide Star reports and do some due diligence, and then help the families make grants. And we also have grant panels that people serve on. And so that's some of the material that Robbe actually will be covering tonight, is what do funders look for when they're looking to decide whether to fund your nonprofits. And we also have other partners here who help us do this as well. And of course, for the nonprofits whose endowment funds we hold in trust, how many of you know if you have an endowment fund with the Community Foundation? I'm going to say probably about 10, 15%. Yeah. So with the endowment funds that we hold in trust, we really try to build the capacity of nonprofits and strengthen what you do so that you can do it even better, and so that people will want to give you more money. So that's this capacity building. This is an example of that. Plus we do grant making for capacity building. Plus we help you when you do have a nonprofit endowment fund with us to make it grow through major gifts. But we're all about that long-term legacy giving, so there's money to grant out to nonprofit charities in good and bad economic times. And if nothing else, these last several months have proven the virtue, I guess, or the bravery of endowment funds, because our fund advisors have money and they're granting it out. And these are tough times, and we're granting it out in even bigger amounts. So this is a good thing. We can't make up for everything that's going on, but we have some strength. So that's our overall program. We help to manage your endowment fund if you have a fund with a foundation, and we also help it to grow. And those pages are in your handout. If you like or don't like what you see here tonight, either way, we invite you to join in and Zoom in to our nonprofit board member roundtables and training workshops. They're free, and they happen on Mondays, usually at noon, once a month. The schedule's here, plus there's a QR code, it's online, just Zoom in. And a lot of the facilitators and trainers who are gonna be helping with the roundtables tonight are going to be helping to facilitate that as well. So Zoom in. Anyone who serves on a nonprofit board or wants to is welcome to Zoom in. And we also have our annual meeting coming up in another month at the ever fabulous Uptown Theater. Rah, they're at that table. And we'll fill up that theater with all kinds of legacy stories, and you can find out what's happening overall for the foundation and for people, connecting people who care with causes that matter forever. So that's what we do at the Community Foundation. Another group that is here tonight, where is Chris Cielo, United Way? Yes, the Chester County Leadership Connection. Oh, and Zeb Davenport, who's not leaving the room, don't worry. The Leadership Connection also has an annual training series for nonprofit boards and people who want to serve on the boards. Chris, do you want to say one word about it? One.
Sold out for the year. It's a great program, and I look into it. We get a lot of people that are already on boards that will participate, and it really, it's an immersive experience, 9 months, 1 full day a month, and you work with a nonprofit on a real problem during that year. This past year, I saw Joyce here. They worked with Friends Association, and happy to tell you more about it if you want to know. And there are some flyers out on that table.
Flyers on the table, QR code here, great program, full year. How many of you have been through the Leadership Connection course already? That's the other thing. We're a great sort of follow-up for that, so great program. I went through the one in 1986 in Philadelphia, so I'm a Leadership Philly alum. I'm not that old, right? And then I went through that when I was at LaSalle's Nonprofit Center, which also offers board of development training and consulting. So those are some other resources. Now, Zeb, I saw you sit down. Come on, a working board. So before we jump into Robbe Healey's incredible information that she's going to impart, we have a bit of time to talk. Zeb, shall I hand you?
Sure. Now, my father told me a long time ago, he said, son, you only get out of something what you put into it. So, my father was a minister, and I would go to church, and I'd be like, it was so boring. And he said, what'd you do? And I said, well, I slept. He said, that's why it was boring. No, I'm just kidding. He was a minister, and he did say that. I didn't sleep. My mother would say, wake up. No. But for the beginning of our Institute tonight, we're going to ask you to participate, and this is the way we're going to do it. At your tables, we want you to engage in some conversations. We have a first question that says, before I say that, I need to introduce 2 important people, all right? Everybody remember the Phil Donahue show? Yeah, I said that to a group of students, and they were like, who? So I wanted to be able to say that. We have 2 amazing students from Westchester University. They're going to help us facilitate this discussion by bringing the microphones to you, because we're going to ask you to participate. Your first question is, why do you serve as a board member? Why do you serve as a board member? You see the prompt up there. It takes energy, time, and plus you take on fiduciary responsibility, right? And we all work. Many of us have families. Many of us have lives outside of our jobs, and we do this work. Folks, yeah, you're right. Oh, you're laughing at the old person with the cane. I don't know. You know what? Don't worry about it. We're not saying anybody in here is old. We're all young at heart. But what I'd like for you to do is take 2 minutes, do some introspective thinking. We have introverts and extroverts. So just take some time to think about why you serve. When you hear me say ready, go, I'd like for you all to talk in your tables for a few seconds about why you serve. And then we will come around and ask you to share what you discussed in your tables. It's called quick response. Are you ready to say yes? Are you really ready to say yes? On the count of 3, give yourselves 1 clap. 1, 2, 3. Now, do your introspective work. You hear me say talk, and then you talk amongst yourselves. Thank you. All right, folks, here we go. I need your attention right here. All right, we're going to come around to your tables, just get a few answers. So tell me what you all discussed. Give us a little synopsis.
I guess I've got voted in as a speaker. So it was a really interesting conversation here. So a lot of us feel that serving on a board is not only giving back to your immediate community, which this is very much about immediate community, but it's using our skills, keeping ourselves active, but also using the skills maybe we learned through our profession to give back to the organization and to feel like we're connected to the community that we're helping serve.
Thank you. All right, that table right there just volunteered. Anybody at that table want to say? Oh, they're pointing to people. He was voluntold.
A couple of things were apparent. For certain people that are born and raised in this community or other communities like this community, it really surfaces from, it's in your DNA, is the way I explained it, especially to my favorite person sitting next to me. It was really apparent from meeting her and meeting other people like yourselves and people on different boards that I've been on, that the reason you're there is because it's our responsibility as the people that have to help those that don't have. It's in my mind and in our collective thought process, it's really not that complicated. It's just a given natural responsibility that good people are supposed to do.
Thank you very much. That's a great answer. We're going to have 2 more groups, the group over here and a group on this area up here. Yes. Right here.
With the general line, instead of the wife to the greater greater one. My biggest thing was that I wanted to show my kids that someone that looked like me, belonged at the table. And a big thing that happened amongst our table was that we're all connected to the wine in some way. Sometimes it happened organic. Sometimes it was because we worked there, and then it just happens. But then you find that you're connected, and it's the wind in the sail that sometimes you needed, or you never knew that that sail was being blown in that direction. And next thing you know, here you are on board or for an organization. So that was us.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Short. I have newly joined the board of the barn at Springbrook Farm, and I'm at a lovely table this evening. I would say there's a lot of common threads that we've discussed in terms of wanting to give back, wanting to share our talents, but I also think for us there seems to be a great degree of interpersonal connectedness to the missions for which we're trying to serve, and really wanting to give back to continue those programs for the next generations to come. And trying to elevate these missions and grow them and reach as many people as possible.
All right, thank you all for participating in the first question. Now, what we're going to do is combine the next 2 questions, all right? What are the biggest issues you face as board members? And then when you think about your board now and or in the future, what are your most desired? Now, what I'd like for you to do is just take a moment and do your own thinking, jot a few things down, and then talk amongst your group, all right? Thank you. All right, it sounds like everybody's kind of gotten through their question. This is the part, this is the part where we really need your feedback. I know we some folks kind of shy, but again, you only get out what you put in. And so this is going to jumpstart us. So when you stand, if you would state your name and the organization with which you represent, and really just a couple of issues that you all face as board members. And we want to try to get to as many people as possible, so you don't have, if you discuss 20, you don't have to give us 20, all right? And if a group comes before you and they discuss the same thing that you discussed, then you can say ditto to what they said and add to it, okay? Because if not, we already have a volunteer. We have a voluntold right here. All right, your name and the organization that you represent. Could you stand and do that? They're pointing to you. Everybody at the table's like, pick our table and ask her.
I don't know if I should speak to this question. I'm a founder and executive director with my wonderful esteemed board members here. So I'm not sure if you want my perspective
Sure,
here.
I want your perspective. Yeah, it's why they were busy. Pick us, her.
Yeah, I'm like, why are they pointing to me? I'm like, but I would say, as a very small, hyper-local organization, one of the big issues we face is, with a smaller board, sometimes I feel like we're putting a lot of weight on a small amount of people when the work is great. So because we're so small and I'm the only paid staff person, our board members are roll up your sleeves, like really amazing people. And one of the biggest fears I have is burning them out.
Yeah.
Because when we have a lot of work and not a lot of space to spread it out. Or even when our board was bigger, a lot of the work maybe fell on a few. So we want to make sure that the work is spread evenly to keep people passionate about the mission and not feeling like they want to run away from it.
Thank you. When you said that, there was a lot of head nods in the room. Let's give her a round of applause. That's great. Anybody, right there. Your name and the board that you represent, and biggest issue and what you most desire.
Good evening, Katie Angstadt with the YMCA of Greater Brandywine. I'm on the association board. I actually just told my table I'm not going to say what we talked about. I'm going to say something completely different, only because what was just shared, I think having the challenge of a smaller board, I actually think you can flip it and have a challenge with having too large a board and not getting the engagement because your board is so large that you can, people may not engage as much. And so for me, what I wrote down was being able to add enough value, right? And so it's kind of a little bit of a other side of the coin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who's next? We got somebody right there. Microphone's coming. Name, organization, and summarize what you discussed.
Jolene Borghese, I'm with Chester County Lifelong Learning. We used to be Chester County Night School. And we had a wonderful member at our table talk about her organization. And one of the things that, and this brings me to the first question too, is this idea of legacy. Our organization was started by 4 couples in Westchester over their kitchen table 70 years ago. And every day I feel that weight on my shoulders that if we go under, I'm disappointing those families. And so that's a lot. That's a lot to handle. And we too have a small board. I'm so worried because there's just a few of us that do the work. And, I feel like I'm burning them out. So I have to, seek for new board members, which is not easy. And this is what some of the members at the table said, that it's hard to get people to be part of our board. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Megan Sutherland. I am on the board of the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. And one of my biggest issues is running a tight financial ship without deprioritizing our staff. So learning how to take care of our staff in addition to taking care of our mission.
That's so important. I think being mindful not only of your board, but the folks who work with you every single day is a very important issue. Anybody want to say what you most desire? Anybody say what you most desire that you discussed at your tables? Any hands? Should we? Oh, yes. All right.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laurie Waddy. I sit on the board at Uptown, Canower Performing Arts, full name. What would I say I most desire? So I've sat on the board for about 2 years. And for those of you who don't know Uptown that well, it's a relatively young organization. So I think we opened our doors, 9 years ago? 2016. There you go. Thank you very much, ma'am. And we went through the pandemic, as everyone did, right? So we're pretty young. And I am happy to report that in my 2 years being on the board, you see this constant evolution of improvement, moving in the right direction. But what I would really like to see is that we continue to become more fact-based, enable ourselves to be more data-driven in terms of what we're doing. So, of course, all toward our mission and whatnot. So I think a focus on governance, tightening up governance, and being more data-driven would be some things that I would desire.
What do you most desire? What'd you talk about? Anybody? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Dan Hoffman. I'm on the board of the Philadelphia Ethical Society, and Camp Linden is one of our programs. And what our board most desires is more bodies to help us. We have some really wonderful members who have been serving on our board, like Nick, who's heading the finance committee. And he's aging out, and we've been putting too much pressure on a handful of members to carry a lot of burden. And so what we desire most is more people to step up and help these members.
It seems like it's a general theme of burnout, right? The 80-20 rule, 20% of the people doing 80% of the work, right?
Hi, everybody. I'm Maggie McIntosh. I am the new, first board meeting will be next week, board chair of the Westchester Food Cupboard. And the thing when I look at the board of the future, what do I most desire as a new chair coming in is preserving the legacy of the amazing organization that already exists while helping them navigate the change that they need to face. The demand from the community, the need from the community is great, as you all know. And so we're putting in some new structures in place to meet that demand. But just such an amazing 100% volunteer-run organization, no paid staff at all. And I really want to make sure that we preserve that into the future. So, thank you.
I'm Marilyn Shields, and I'm the vice chair of the board for the Fund for Women and Girls. And I guess what we most desire, or one of the things that is very important to us as a board, is that we have a diverse membership and that we have a wealth of lived experience that is that it comes to the table so as to be able to make the best possible decisions in, creating the strategic direction for the fund.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Vilter from the Volunteer English Program. This has already been said, but to mention one specific thing about increasing the size of the board, we're looking not only for a larger board, but a more diverse board in terms of skills and demographic representation as well. Obviously, we serve immigrants from all over Chester County who open their own businesses, become citizens, and help their children to succeed. So we want our board to reflect that diversity.
Good evening. My name is Deneen Lear, and I am the board chair for Integrate for Good. It is a nonprofit that supports people, students, and young adults with disability. And, thanks to, I have to give a shout out to RSVP Group, who have helped us to lay down a strong strategic plan, both short and long term. But in addition to bodies and help, we'd like to, or I desire to, be able to have more knowledge of how to tap into wealth, endowments, as you mentioned earlier, and those things that, in addition to, you were asked earlier, what is your plan for if you got hit by a bus? That wasn't good. But what is your succession plan? Let's keep it professional, right? What is your succession plan? But we work so hard to, build our finances, worrying about our, financial statements, et cetera. It would be nice to know that we do have something that is in the future, again, talking about wealth, investments, and and those things that we don't know a lot about.
Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. All right.
Hi, my name is Begum Abad. I'm actually not a nonprofit, even though we have been running in the last 11 years as a nonprofit. I actually want to learn, and if anybody can help me today, but we actually have a lot of people that want to volunteer in our organization. It is River Goddesses. It's a women empowerment sports organization. we've been running through the platform of dragon boating, but we do have already an education program. We have a mentorship program. We work with Peru with a collaboration with another nonprofit in Colorado. And people are very, very excited about the mission itself. We want to escalate to becoming a nonprofit, so hopefully grow. But I certainly am here to learn from all of you how to put together a good board membership. I'm the founder, I'm the executive director, but as I said, I'm here to learn. So if anybody can approach me and kind of give some guidance, I'm really welcome for that. Thank you.
And I just cheated 2 people from the same table. So, so Michael Carwick, volunteer with the Chester County Estate Planning Council. I'm chairing that board this year, and a volunteer with the Chester County Community Foundation. And at the root of what I heard here a lot are 2 things. I'd like to be able to be heard in a crowded marketplace, whether it's online, in person, and be heard. It's by donor, it's by the community, it's by board members. We were talking about board members. We want the good board members. You know, how do we stand out and be heard out there? And I think what that takes, and I'm so glad we have so many people here today, because the second thing I want is to make sure we're all working to make the pie bigger, right? The nonprofit pie, the community-oriented pie, the philanthropic pie. Remember, it's not a fixed pie. If I get a good board member, it doesn't mean you can't have a board member now. We just have to find more board members out there. But really, you know, you're either a fixed pie thinker or an expanding pie thinker. And if we can all think about growing philanthropy, community, all of these things together, the pie can be bigger of people that help each other. And I would love to see that as well.
So there are, you know, there's a lot of themes that seem to be common. And Michael, I appreciate your comment of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so we have some wonderful presenters, facilitators this evening. I won't steal anybody's thunder, but it is, first, before I say anything else, let's give Austin and let's give Brooke a round of applause. Thank you both so much. I believe that if you remain present in this space and come with the mindset of wanting to grow, learn, and do, I think you'll walk away, again, better than you walked in. So thank you all so much for participating. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank our staff at the Community Foundation and our facilitators, and also, no, you.
And thank you, Zeb Davenport, PhD, EDD, sorry, doctor, for facilitating some conversation to get us rolling. So I appreciate that very much so. Thank you. And next, without further ado, Robbe Healey. I got to tell you, when I came to Philadelphia in 1983, and when I got to LaSalle's Nonprofit Center and became the director a decade later, Robbe Healey was somebody whose name kept coming up. And then when I came out to Chester County and found out that she's right here in our backyard, I was thrilled. So Robbe, some of you know Robbe. She's been a trainer internationally, trainer and consultant for longer than I even want to admit, and has been doing exemplary work throughout the country, helping nonprofits to maximize their potential. Robbe's going to talk tonight with you about high-impact boards, and there's a lot to this presentation. I think she's going to give a lot of information. Some of it, I'd ask, you can apply immediately. Other, you're going to have to put in your back pocket and know it's there, and call us when you want help taking it out. All right, so there's a lot to cover. Robbe, would you come up? And you're on a lavalier mic, aren't you? So we're going to let you have the show. You all have handouts. If there's extras there, take them with you. This is all online as well. And we're videotaping so that you can look at this every single day. Or not. Robbe, the floor is yours.
I want to thank Karen and Zeb for the invitation to be with you this evening. And I was listening to all of your preliminary comments about what challenges you have and what aspirations you have. And again, tonight we're going to talk about the role of board members. So I have a question for you first. If you're willing, raise your hand if in your youth, in your childhood, the people who raised you, your parents or the caregivers who raised you, if they served on the board of a 501c3 nonprofit in your community, not a congregation if you're a person of faith, but a 501c3 nonprofit. How many of you had parents who served on nonprofit boards? Look around the room. My hand's up as an example. My parents did not. Thank you for raising your hands. Think about the stuff you love to do. Not necessarily your vocation, but your avocation. For some of us, it was something you aspired to learn as an adult. I took up pottery. I was not exposed to that as a child. I wanted to learn that, and I was very intentional about that. I also loved to swim. I grew up in the Midwest. If you've ever lived there or if you grew up there, we swim in swimming pools. Lakes and rivers have watercraft on them. We rarely swim in them. So I can never remember a time in my life when I didn't know how to swim. I learned to swim in the YWCA pool in the basement in Burlington, Iowa. That's where the pool was. The pool was in the basement of the YWCA. I can never remember not knowing how to swim. My daughter, when I moved here, my daughter was 3, and we bought a house, don't groan, we bought a house that wasn't air conditioned. We moved in Labor Day, the weekend of Labor Day weekend. I'd never lived this far south. We didn't realize we needed an air conditioned house. So it's hotter than blue blazes. Her dad is off working because he sold farm machinery and it was the middle of the summer. And it is so hot. All I want to do is take this 3-year-old to the pool. Now the 3-year-old, when she was 8 days old, had learned to swim in the YMCA pool in Liverpool, New York. The 8 days the cord dropped off, we're in the water. She couldn't remember a time when she couldn't swim either. So we bought a townhouse in a townhouse community that had one of those giant pools. It's almost Labor Day weekend. There's nobody in the big pool. I happen to be an extrovert. I didn't care about meeting anybody. I just wanted Amelia and me in the water. So there's this phenomenon going on where the baby pool, the round circle pool, was packed. All the women sitting on the edge, all the kids in there like sardines, but who cares? So we go up for the 3 days. The pool closes because it's Labor Day, and I join the babysitting co-op. I make friends, Amelia makes friends. Memorial Day comes around, the pool opens again. We go up, and nobody in the big pool. A few teenage boys who hadn't figured out that the pool was boring yet, they were there. But Amelia and I are the only non-teenage boys in the pool. All the women, all the moms in the big circle, all the kids standing there. Well, now Amelia starts whining. She wants Jenny to swim with her in the pool. And of course, we'd already joined the Y. She was swimming, doing the swimming lessons. We're doing all the stuff. And I go to Carol, Jenny's mom, and I said, Amelia would really love to have someone to play with in the pool. Can Jenny come in the pool with us? No, she doesn't know how to swim. I'm like, and this is a true story. I had come off just working for the Girl Scouts for 10 years. I had all the Red Cross certifications you could possibly imagine. Water safety instructor, CPR, life-saving, all the things. So I tell Carol, blah, 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 would you let me show her how to swim? So Carol brings her lawn chair, and it was one of those, remember those folding chairs with the webbing? They were light and everybody had them. So Carol drags her chair over to the edge, and she is sitting at the edge of the pool like a first-time flyer in a turbulent flight. Her knuckles are white. Now, fortunately, Jenny hadn't figured out it was terrifying to be in the pool. So by the end of 2 weeks, she was jumping into me. She's doing monkey crawling to get to the ladder. She's swimming a little bit, more dog paddling than swimming, but she felt okay in the water. And what's happening? all these people circling the pool are coming to me one at a time. Would you teach my boys to swim? Would you teach my whatever? Healey's giving free swimming lessons. Why wouldn't you sign up? So back to the what do you love? And when did it come to you? Well, some of the things you probably like to do as adults might have been things that you learned in your family of origin as a younger child. You were exposed to them. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's a sport that you play, or music, or something, whatever it is. So if you think about all these people in the pool, what I later discovered was they never did swim. They went to the shore. I finally learned down the shore is not dinosaur. I literally thought these people were going to the dinosaur golf tournament in Palm Springs, California. I'm not kidding. I grew up in Chicago and then lived in Syracuse. I didn't know down the shore. So anyway, bottom line is they waded and they tanned, but they didn't swim. So we're all here in a room together tonight to talk about board governance. Most of us didn't grow up in a family where board governance was part of the DNA of the family. We also have, in this country and culture, for better or for worse, actually for worse, we are trained from adolescence, when you're a grown-up, don't admit what you don't know in front of other grown-ups. So you join a board, you're supposed to do fundraising. You're supposed to do governance. You're not supposed to micromanage the staff and do operations. You're supposed to be strategic and generative and safeguard the mission and make sure that you've got enough money to do the work. You're supposed to predict the future of the needs of the organization, and you're supposed to collaborate together as one happy team. Not groupthink, but collaborative. But you never learned how to do that. So it's like the women in the baby pool who never learned how to swim. So by the end of this evening, I hope some of you will be willing to admit that as a group, we need some swimming lessons. Because you wouldn't be in this room if you didn't care about the mission. I heard that in your why do you volunteer? You don't volunteer for an organization whose mission you don't treasure. If you do, you're kind of a fraud, and you wouldn't be in this room. But at the same time, if you haven't learned how to do the work, and if you're not willing to be part of the group that says, I'd really like to be in the big pool, but I don't know how to swim, tonight can be the beginning of getting into the water. For some of you, you've already been in the water for a while. Some of your organizations, every organization is a different life stage of maturity. Every board is at a different stage. And tonight, as we go through the material, we're going to talk about 3 very distinctive sets of board governance responsibilities and blend them all together. I believe that you will find similarities with where your board is right now. And it's just a baseline. It's not a criticism, it's not an affirmation, it's a baseline. And wherever you are now, you can evolve. You talked about that when Zeb was giving you a chance to give your feedback. I want to keep evolving as an organization. And there are ways to do that. But when you think about it, if you're willing to raise the bar by saying, I do need a few lessons, you can really advance the work of the organization whose time you're spending your time on. So back to the swimming pool. At the end of the summer, there were a bunch of kids going off the diving board. Some of them were actually diving. A lot of them were still jumping. But they were swimming competently enough that they could go in and get to the side. Then there was the group clinging to the shallow end. They were in the pool, though. They liked being in the pool. They thought the pool was cool. They really wanted to get better, but they were still in the shallow end. And then there were the people in the middle. That's a typical board. You've got the people in the deep end all the time. Those are the ones doing all the work. Then you've got the people in the shallow end. Those, quite frankly, are the ones you have to beg to do some of the work. Probably not, if any, Probably no one in that group is in here because you wouldn't be here tonight if that was your thing. And then you've got the people in the middle. In your lane, doing your stuff. Maybe to get out of your lane, somebody has to invite you, encourage you. But as you think about the evolution of a board, I want to make one comment that I hadn't planned in my PowerPoint. Board Source, which used to be the National Center for Nonprofit Boards, Board Source says they survey boards continuously. And the typical board in the United States today fluctuates between 16 and 18 members. If you think about the 80-20 rule, and I actually have the 10-80-10 rule, 10% of the people are doing all the things all the time. 10% of the people never show up. And 80% in the middle are doing stuff when it fits, and you ask them and you assign. If we could get it to be the 33-33 rule and the pool, 33% of the people doing stuff all the time, maybe 33% doing a little bit, but at least they're doing something. And then the 33 in the middle, you would have a whole different engagement. And we are going to talk about governance and board recruitment. But think about admitting, yeah, I'm willing to take the swimming lessons, because that starts the evolution from wherever you are today to where you want to go next. So, swimming lessons for all. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about trends. What are the trends in the nonprofit sector right now? We're also going to talk about the legal responsibilities of nonprofit board members, and I'd imagine most of you are pretty familiar with that. And that may be the baseline that you're working with right now. We're going to do a deeper dive into the 10 essential responsibilities of nonprofit boards. Again, that's the work of Board Source, and some of you may have been focused on that. And we're also going to talk about the governance as leadership model. Chait, Ryan, and Taylor's work out of the Hauser Center for Nonprofits, which in my opinion is one of the best comprehensive discussions of how boards move fluidly between and among responsibilities that's in the marketplace today. Then we're going to look at how you knit all the models together. How do you make sure you're doing all the legal responsibilities continuously, maximizing the 10 essential responsibilities, and moving fluidly between fiduciary, strategic, and generative governance? And then we've got 2 activities for you to do in your table groups, and we're going to do that towards the end so that you will have an opportunity to think about the things we've talked about, hopefully do an honest assessment of what things you're doing today, and have them as takeaways. And again, as Karen said, the worksheets will be available on the website so that you can download them and use them. So when you think about why you serve on nonprofit boards, and you mentioned a lot of these, personal commitment to the cause. And again, why would you serve on a board if the mission didn't really excite you and motivate you? A desire to make a meaningful impact, professional or leadership development, community involvement and civic engagement. I didn't hear you talk about networking and relationship building. But I think for many of us, serving on a board has become part of our professional networking opportunity, and we build relationships within the community with like-minded individuals who care about the same things. Personal fulfillment and purpose and influence and advocacy. And of course, there were others that were mentioned as you were talking. As we think about the reasons we serve, and you think about who you're going to recruit to your board, oftentimes they are the very same models. They're the very same things that appeal to you. Sometimes not. One of the things that's interesting about professional skills is, as board members, we don't use our professional skills in a day-to-day sense. We use them in an advisory sense. And that's a slippery slope, and one that many of us have a hard time with. And that's the trying not to micromanage the staff. So the trends, the most significant trends that are affecting nonprofit boards today in terms of governance are DEI, DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And of course, the federal conversation about the appropriateness of that is a challenge for some organizations. It's a given for some. It's some that others haven't really started talking about. But at the same time, we're all aware of how that has been unfolding. The issue for me is, how do we integrate effectively with dignity people with lived experience into the conversation so that all the people who need to be at the table are sitting at the table? Because if we are prescribing rather than engaging, we run the risk of missing the mark. So DEIB is clearly one. Strategic use of data for governance and oversight. And you talked about that. I want to be more data-driven. The interesting thing about that is, do you have the capacity to gather the data that you want to see? Do you have the tools and the access? Because gathering data is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So as a board governs, what is the data that you need to ensure that you're fulfilling your strategic plan? And if you don't have access to it yet, can you actually gather it? Do you have the tools to gather it? Do you have the staff capacity to gather it? And do you have the bandwidth on the board to understand it? But it clearly is a conversation that many boards are having today. A growing demand for generative governance, and we're going to talk about that. That's clearly a part of Chait, Ryan, and Taylor's work. But generative governance is, what's the future look like? Not how do we stay in business today, but how do we stay in business today while we've got our eyes on the prize? The next one is blurring the boundaries between board and management. And most of us, unless we own our own company or have a very high-level position, most of us don't spend our time during the day developing strategies. We implement tactics for other people. So when you come in the boardroom, the skill you bring is tactical implementation. How do you step back and say, I trust the staff to do the work? And if the outcomes they're creating are consistent with the strategies we established, it's not my job to tell them what tactics to use to get to the strategic outcome. And you can call yourself on that, because if you're blurring the lines, you're setting up an environment where there's a trust gap. And heightened expectations for transparency and ethical governance. Transparency's been a thing for a while, and it's not going away, and it's something that we will continue to be concerned about. The current trends for board recruitment, and you talked about this, strategic skills-based recruitment. Instead of the same people in the room talking about who do we know, who can we get, really being very focused on what are the skills, the abilities, the interests, and the attributes of the people we need, and are they willing to use them with us? And we're going to talk about governance committees as a year-round activity, not as a nominating function once a year. Focused on involving people with lived experience and broad community representation. And we need to be mindful of the fact that if our board has been kind of a closed loop, do people with lived experience feel welcomed at the table and in the conversation? And do we have a culturally competent board that will welcome people with different experience? And if we don't, we may need to do some homework before we can invite those people to join us with dignity and success. Broad and transparent outreach. I happen to chair the governance committee, and my executive director is here, Jeff Spencer. I chair the governance committee for the Housing Partnership. And we do a lot of conversation about recruitment and outreach, and how do we get outside of our normal silo in order to really look for people who are in the right parts of the county, that have the right skills, that want to serve with us. And our recruitment process takes at least 4 months, from identifying a person who might be interested to qualifying them and them qualifying us, and orientation, and then joining the board. So you can't do it when you've got a month till your annual meeting and you've got 5 slots to fill. Well, just saying. You've heard of this. I hear the giggles. Onboarding and engagement from day one. I worked in an organization where our CEO believed you needed to serve on the board for a full year before you should be asked to join a committee. You're the most excited when you're new. So we've given them a year to be passive and detached. That didn't work. So is recruitment aligned with fundraising and advocacy needs? Everybody's favorite, you gotta raise money. We're gonna talk about that at the end. But you do have to do that, and you all know that, but you didn't take the lessons, and it makes you scared, so we're gonna talk about that. So the first baseline is the legal responsibilities of nonprofit boards. Duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. And of course, most of you are probably very familiar with this. Duty of care, you have to make informed judgments. You have to do your due diligence. You have to get advice when you need it, perhaps from external consultants or professionals. And as you're moving into new territory, make sure you've done all your homework. It doesn't mean you can't be nimble. It just means you have to be thorough. And you have to proactively participate in all of those discussions. Duty of loyalty, you as the board member have to act in the best interests of the organization. It's interesting, probably one of the questions I get more often than not is, can you have somebody on your board who does business with your nonprofit? In my opinion, you absolutely can. But you have to have an excellent conflict of interest policy that board members sign every single year, not once when they were onboarded that they forgot about. And your board agenda, at the beginning of the board agenda, you have to call for statement of conflicts of interest if any exist. You can do it, but you have to be willing to enforce it. And if you're just paying lip service to it, you're going to sabotage yourself. But the duty of loyalty then is, even if you are in a business relationship with the nonprofit on whose board you serve, you can't participate in those discussions. And that's easy. You're out of the room. But again, you have to be willing to do that. The other piece of this is respecting confidentiality. Respecting the confidentiality of what's discussed in the boardroom. You could have a sensitive negotiation going on, and if somebody blabs, you'll never guess what we're trying to work on. You can sabotage that kind of activity. And unfortunately, in my lived experience as a staff member, I can remember one of those where a board member kind of got out ahead of himself, and a real estate deal that the company was trying to do got sabotaged because he was bragging about the fact that our organization was working on that. So that's really cone of silence. Doesn't mean not transparent, but it does mean confidential when you need to be confidential. And the duty of obedience. You have policies, you have procedures, you have board position descriptions, you have all of the documents that govern the work. You have to be obedient to those. That's just the baseline. That's just the beginning. That is not the whole package. And for some of you, for the boards you're on, that may be the orientation that your board has. And you've at least got a really strong start. So when we move into the next piece, which I think is where a lot of boards were really aimed 10 years ago and perhaps still, BoardSource is an amazing repository of high quality resources for nonprofit boards. If you are not a member of BoardSource, you might want to think about having at least one member of your organization belong to that. There are dozens of free downloads when you're a member and resources that will really help you with the kinds of challenges you have. So the 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards. Number one, determine the mission and purpose. This shocks some board members. Some board members think the staff tells them the mission and purpose of the organization. Think about this. Every one of these organizations started with a group of highly passionate, dedicated volunteers. There were no staff then. When you got enough critical mass to hire staff, you did. Every one of you on a board is a successor of one of those founding volunteers. You are the guardians of the mission and purpose. Doesn't mean it can't evolve, but it does mean you have to really be careful about mission creep, going where you don't belong. But your statement of mission and vision and values is the board's responsibility. Now, we're all smart enough to know if you're going to change it or analyze it, you've got to do it as a trusting group of board and staff together. But at the end of that process, the board votes, the staff doesn't. So you are the guardians of that. You select the chief executive. You also support and evaluate the chief executive. And evaluate means holistic, the whole board is involved, but you need to make sure you're providing the right support for that individual and you're doing it as collaborative, respectful members of the same team. Ensure that you're doing effective planning. Strategic planning is a board accountability. I've actually worked with organizations who said, the board doesn't do strategic planning, the staff does, and they bring it to us and they tell us what it is. That may be the way it's working right now, but it's wrong. Again, we're all smart enough to know that if you've got a robust, productive, forward-looking strategic plan, you need to talk about it together. But at the end of the day, the board adopts the strategic plan, then the staff transforms it into a tactical business plan, while the board keeps the strategy piece on their own work plan. Yeah, they got a board work plan that comes out of the strategic plan. The staff doesn't do it all for them. But again, ensuring effective planning is a board accountability. You monitor and strengthen programs and services. You don't micromanage them. How do you strengthen them? By making sure they have appropriate resources to do the work you want to have done. Monitoring means if something's not going well, you have the courage to change it. It also means if you're adding a new program, you give it enough time to make sure it's working or not working before you pull the plug. So monitoring is different than managing. And keep in mind what I said earlier, most of us do tactics in our day jobs. So if the staff is getting the outcomes done, but not necessarily in the way you would do it if you were the staff member, that doesn't make it wrong, it only makes it different. So be very careful about what you're assessing and evaluating. Ensure adequate financial resources. This is everybody's favorite. So there are only 3 ethical revenue streams in the nonprofit sector. Public funding, which of course is a little bit tenuous right now because that's government contracts. Fee-for-service revenue. So can the food cupboard charge for what it wants? For what the clients, the customers take? Of course not. Can People's Light and Theater sell subscriptions and also raise money? Of course they can. So they've got fee-for-service revenue at People's Light. They don't have fee-for-service revenue at the food cupboard. So not every nonprofit can use that fee-for-service revenue stream. The only one left is philanthropy. Most of us need to take a lot of swimming lessons to be comfortable with philanthropy. But if you decide you want to do the whole board source thing, including number 6, ensuring financial resources, philanthropy's in there. Kay Sprinkle Grace has written a book about AAA boards where she says, 1/3 of your board has to be askers, 2/3 of your board need to be advocates, and 100% of your board needs to be ambassadors. She acknowledges that not all of us are going to be comfortable being askers in the room. So as you're looking at board recruitment, be very transparent that you're gonna have to be out there as an advocate, as an ambassador, talking about us, what we do, why we do it. Now, I happen to be a Rotarian. I don't want you telling me every time, so if I see you at my Rotary meeting, I'm gonna run away screaming because I don't want to hear the ambassador thing again. So you have to be appropriate with it, but talking about the work you do and why you do it. But we also have to be taught how to tell the story. So that becomes part of board governance, is teaching people not just how to ask, but also how to story tell. Every nonprofit I know of has amazing stories, but we don't tell them well enough. And one of the I was writing down some notes as you were talking. The last comment I wrote down was being heard in a crowded marketplace. Is anybody familiar with the work of Dan Pallotta, his book Uncharitable? A few. Dan Pallotta wrote this book where he pretty much pillories American decision makers who say nonprofits can't invest in infrastructure and branding. And isn't it a conundrum? If we aren't doing enough branding and investing in enough storytelling, we're invisible, but we want to raise money. But if nobody's heard of us, they can't get excited about us. But we don't want to spend money on branding because it's overhead, and we don't want to get pilloried for spending money on overhead, so we don't do it. And then we're invisible, and then we can't raise money. And then we talk about, can we actually spend money on branding? Are we willing to stand up to the funders, and I'm talking about individuals now, to say, yes, we are proudly investing in storytelling because we want more people excited about what we do and how we do it so they can help us. Budgets are board policies. They are not staff policies. So when you budget to do your programs and you don't want to be invisible, then you're going to make a decision about investing in your future. Now, I am smart enough to know you don't have tens of thousands of dollars laying around to hire extra staff and do a lot more print and digital media. But you need to do some, and you need to do more as it gets better. But that's part of your consideration, is adequate financial resources. And are you spending the money on the right stuff? Do you look at the budget every time you pass a budget and align it with the strategic plan? And if you're not, could be a good activity to do. And most of us are approaching our budgeting season right now, so it can be very timely. Support and evaluate the CEO. So make sure that you're providing appropriate support for him, her, or them. What are the training opportunities they need? Do they need, or would they love to have an executive coach to help them develop a new or different skill? Are there associations they need to belong to? Are there tables they need to sit at so that you need to realign their position description so they are available to be at the tables they need to be sitting at, and have somebody else doing the tactical work back in the office? So thinking very critically about how do you support their success, and then also how do you evaluate them in terms of the goals you set for them, the goals they set for themselves, and the outcomes they created. Ensuring effective planning, and we talked briefly about planning earlier, but if you're not looking at the broad planning once your strategic plan is crafted, you're missing a responsibility. That's where we put it on the shelf and ignore it until the funder says, you need an updated strategic plan because yours is 3 years old. Oh, yeah, right. Well, we better do a new one. But making sure you're on top of it year over year and period over period. Let's see, I'm going the wrong way here. Protect assets and provide proper financial oversight. Protecting assets is your physical plant and your reserve funds, but also oversight of the budget. Some of you probably have staff in a finance department, maybe a controller or a bookkeeper or a CFO. Not every organization does. But the finance committees need to be very, very attentive to the monthly financial reporting. Some of your boards meet quarterly. Your finance committees are certainly meeting monthly and making sure that things are on track. But as the board is developing the annual budget and looking at fiscal controls, are there outliers, things that you were anticipating that didn't happen, or opportunities you had that you didn't anticipate? So looking at fiscal oversight is a huge piece of the board's responsibility, but not every board member needs to be as invested in understanding the day-to-day cash flow as the members of the finance committee need to be. So part of the responsibility of the finance committee is to make the financial statements understandable by the rest of us, which doesn't mean they dummy it down, but it does mean that you highlight the things that are really important in terms of year over year, month over month, and monitoring. And from time to time, you may be borrowing for some project, you may be financing something, you may be looking at a new opportunity that requires capacity building, and those are the things that you as board members need to be very mindful of. Building a competent board. This is your governance committee's call to action. It is not the executive director's job to find the new board members. I am smart enough to know, and I'm not going to ask you to put up your hands, I'm smart enough to know that there are organizations where that is the expectation. And that, quite frankly, is wrong. As you transition into having a full-blown governance committee that does the year-round work of governance, the executive director, the CEO needs to be in the room when those conversations happen. They need to have the opportunity to meet the prospective board members, but they are not the recruiter and they are not the ultimate approver of who gets to join the board. It's always interesting to me when you do new board member orientation, who leads the discussion? If the CEO or the executive director is leading the discussion, that telegraphs to the new members, that's the person in charge of the board. But they're not. The board chair is in charge of the board. So the governance committee is responsible for making sure the board chair is oriented and comfortable with doing that onboarding role. And if that's a shift in your work, then the governance committee chair probably needs to have a role in that. Doesn't mean the governance committee chair should do it, because every officer needs to be involved in good onboarding, whether you're onboarding one person or 5 or 6 in a new class. And if that's not working for you yet, think about how you can evolve that. Because in my opinion and experience, the most powerful committee on any board is the governance committee. You are the person that gets the people in the boat. I hate that bus analogy. I don't want people on the bus. They can be looking out the back. They can be hanging out the windows. But if we've got everybody, think about one of those giant shells with the 8 rowers. And if we could have a 16-rower shell, does a dragon boat have that many people? 20? Cool. Get them in a dragon boat. Everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction, or you don't go anyplace. That doesn't mean groupthink. It does mean headed in the same direction. So building a competent board. Ensuring legal and ethical integrity, and this of course goes back to the legal responsibilities we talked about a few minutes ago. But the board is ultimately responsible for adhering to the legal standards. And hopefully you all have directors and officers insurance for your boards, but at the same time, you can't be deliberately negligent. So making sure that you are in compliance with all the legal standards and enhancing your public standing. And doesn't that go with number 6? Because you can't fundraise if you don't have a strong brand image. It just doesn't work. So let me take a pause and see if you want to push back, poke at, ask questions about any of these 10. We've got one.
Go back to your beginning of DEIB.
Okay.
I would like to add on A and J, accessibility and justice.
Thank you.
Here's a question.
Okay.
You mentioned the strategic use of data,
Yep.
and you said boards are expected to use data, not just financials. What data are you referring to?
One of the trends right now is boards wanting to use data for discernment and decision-making. So I don't mean this, I say this all the time, I don't care what data. And it doesn't mean I don't give a rip. It means I don't think there's a specific data set in the nonprofit sector that every board should be looking at. I think what you need to figure out is, in order for you to know you've achieved your strategic goals and your annual tactical goals, what data do we need to prove that we did that? And it's not throughputs, it's outcomes. What are the outcomes we created? How do we know the work we did was successful? So within your sphere of work, when you do the work you do, those are the throughputs, what are the outcomes we created, and how do we know if they worked? So if you haven't gotten there yet, a task force to look at what are the outcome data we need in order to figure out if we were actually successful would be an appropriate step.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because the data sets will be different for every nonprofit in the room.
Yeah.
Other questions? We have another one over here. Here comes the microphone.
As to having staff fundraise, well, you know, I know lots of nonprofits that hire grant writers, and we really like staff fundraising. But the bigger issue is when we are asking for donations, and we ourselves are donating, because there's a lot of donors in this room right now.
Of course there are.
I always like to donate specifically to overhead, because that is where organizations often have a desperate need. Everybody wants to give to all the glam stuff. And I like boards going out of their way to ask specifically for overhead donations and to explain to people why that's so valuable.
You raise a really interesting point, because I think one of the things that we often don't do is write our comprehensive organizational case for support. And you write them when you're doing a capital campaign. You write a capital campaign case, but do we have the annual operating case for support? Wherever needs are greatest is always in a case for support. And wherever needs are greatest is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's another way of saying unrestricted. But unrestricted has a bad rep. It's like a lightning rod for, I'm not gonna know where you spent my money. Well, no, we're not. But wherever needs are greatest, that board is brilliant. The brand is strong, the board is brilliant. So part of the branding is who the board members are and who the staff are. But at the same time, if you develop that high level of trust, then when the donor gives to wherever needs are greatest, you can spend it on overhead, because that's going to be a great need. The other thing is some money is fungible. So if you're lucky enough, or if your mission allows you to have fee-for-service revenue, that money's not restricted to anything. So you can raise all kinds of restricted money and use that fungible operating revenue to fund overhead. But we still have to be willing to defend against the people who are assailing us because we're investing in branding, and because we're investing in high-quality staff by having competitive staff salaries, and because we're investing in good infrastructure and physical plants that don't look like they're falling down. I mean, how many of us, I don't know about you, but I've been with people who think if the building is well-maintained, it's got to be a for-profit. Well, that's just crap. Karen, am I allowed to say crap? It's just crap. Because the people we serve need to be served in dignified spaces. They deserve to be served in dignified spaces. The staff who work with us deserve to have dignified spaces to work in that aren't falling down. Deferred maintenance is not a good thing. So anyway, thank you for letting me share. You can write a demerit. Yes.
Frank Chiquila from RSVP Volunteers.
how prevalent is surveying board member satisfaction in the current environment, especially with new board members in that first year?
If it's not prevalent, it's a bad practice. And there are a couple of ways of doing board satisfaction. One is at every single meeting. How did I feel about today's meeting? Was my time used well? Did we stay on track? Did we have robust discussions? All the things that would tell whether or not the meeting was well run. The other one is annual surveys. How did I feel annually? The governance committee is responsible for making that happen. The other thing is, do we do an external analysis periodically? And again, Board Source has a fabulous one. Do we do an external analysis periodically to figure out how we measure up with other boards? And if you're not doing that, you're talking to yourself. But I don't know how prevalent they are, but they ought to be an automatic part of the work of a governance committee. Not every board is ready to do them yet, so that's part of the swimming lessons problem. But thanks for the question. We have another one up here. And this is being recorded, which is why we're waiting for the microphones.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm on with the board of Maternal and Child Health Consortium of Chester County. Regarding these basic responsibilities, how do you keep that in the forefront, like reinforcing it? So, like we're not shifting in the pool, like you said, right? Some of us are in the middle and we shift into the shallow end and want to take.
No, don't go back to the shallow end. Stay in the middle.
How do you keep this in front of them? Is it layering it into your board agenda, right? Like each one of these becomes almost a topic or an indirect message to them so that these are staying with all of our members and keeping them focused on those things.
In my opinion and experience, you do it in two ways. One is to make sure it's somebody's job. So, Finance Committee, that's easy. Development Committee, I hate development committees. I couldn't be more serious, and many of you know my first point of entry was fundraising. But if you've got a development committee, everybody who's on it feels burdened, everybody who's not on it, I dodged that bullet. I want a team approach to fundraising where every single board member's on a team. Now, if your bylaws require you to have a development committee, you don't need to revise them. You just make the chairs of those teams your development committee. Easy peasy. But if assuring adequate resources is a board accountability, have a Young Friends team. Have a leadership annual giving team. Have an event team if it's not the team that picks the menus and the napkin colors. It's got to be getting people to come at high-level tickets and sponsorships. It's got to be about money, not about pretty stuff. They can also pick that, but they can be on two committees then. But the other piece of it is make sure it's written into your board governance action plan for the year. Because if you've got a true governance committee, it's got an action plan, and it's got to be mindful of all that stuff. If you don't have a strategic plan and you get one, please, then you have a strategic plan task force that monitors the strategic plan over time. So it's not sitting on a shelf. In my opinion, do you have a report on the strategic plan process at every board meeting? No, stupid, in my opinion. But are the individual groups charged with implementation, reporting on the strategic plan progress? Of course they are. I'm also a fan of consent agendas, and we didn't build that into this presentation tonight. But anything that can be reported on that's already happened, write it down and put it in a consent agenda so that each of those committees that's bringing something is bringing a question that needs the full think tank of the board to give input. But I think that's how you do it. But I wouldn't put the 10 things on your board agenda. I would weave them into the work of the committees, and some of them obviously are shared with staff. Any more? All right, so here, Chait, Ryan, and Taylor, and I realize in research years, this is ancient history. Their research was 2004, this was released. Board Source and helped fund their research. Chait, Ryan, and Taylor looked at the models of board governance that were prevalent in the marketplace, in the sector when they did their research. And if you look at in the 70s and 80s, Peter Drucker had brought management by objectives to United States manufacturing companies. Notice management by objectives, not governance by objectives. But Frances Hesselbein, CEO of Girl Scouts of the USA, and remember, I had worked for the Girl Scouts for 10 years, so I was actually a Girl Scout staff member when Peter Drucker was involved with Frances at GSUSA. He actually set up the structure where I, as a entry-level field director, had to send a report up to my board every Friday of how many meetings I'd had. Did I meet with troop leaders? Did I recruit new troop leaders? What were my volunteer teams looking like? That's not governance. That's micromanagement. That report should have gone up to my field services director. She saw it, but then had to go up to the board every single Friday. So in my opinion, that was giving boards permission to micromanage. And it made sense to them because that's the kind of work they did in their day jobs. So along comes John Carver. John Carver in the late 90s, early 2000s. Did anybody use policy governance, John Carver's policy governance? We have one yes. We have one admitted yes. Oh, two. Well, in my opinion, policy governance was this. You as a board would establish policies. So let's pretend the policy is the staff is responsible for managing the budget within 5% over under. If you had census, you had to manage your census within 3% of targets. You had to manage your workers' compensation claims within X% of targets. Everything had a policy. Well, what happened then? The CEO, the executive director would say, we're good. In my opinion, we went from permission to micromanage all the way to permission to abdicate our responsibility for having a clue what was going on. So Ryan and Taylor did not invent a new approach. What they did was take all the legal responsibilities, the board source accountabilities, and they put them in one blended model. And the blended model has 3 modes: fiduciary, strategic, and generative. So fiduciary, that's board as the controlling group. Strategic, that's the direction seeking. How are we best in class today? Generative, how do we make meaning out of our mission going forward so that 10 years from now, we will still be best in class? You could have had the most generative board on the planet in March of 2020. You had to snap back to fiduciary. You had to figure out how to keep your people safe and pay the bills. So this is not linear, it's fluid. And depending on what you're doing, you will do any and all of these throughout the year. So type 1 governance, fiduciary governance. Notice it's not financial, it's not fiscal. This is where care, loyalty, and obedience fit in. It's the baseline. It's also looking at the traditional responsibilities of making sure you're taking care of the money, making sure you're in compliance with every rule and regulation you need to be in compliance with, and it's oversight. If you're doing all that today, great. But if you're not moving past that, there's some swimming lessons you could still take. And in most boards, in my opinion and experience, you've got a couple people who are always in all 3 modes, but others who are very comfortable being stuck in fiduciary because, of course, we're thinking about care, loyalty, and obedience, and that's where these live. So a type 1 board, every single board has to do type 1 work, but you have to do it correctly and in the right proportion. Oftentimes, a type 1 board has board committees that mirror the staff departments. You don't need to have a committee that mirrors the staff departments. You already have staff on that. So think about how to transform the committees so that you're adding value to the work of the staff, not micromanaging them. When you've got a type 1 board, you are often focused on the very technical work rather than a much more human and encompassing work. Type 1 boards are process-driven. They look like they're very effective because meetings are a series of reports, of staff functions and things reported by board members. These are often boards that react to and ratify recommendations made by staff. And it's like the strategic plan. The staff wrote it and we're going to approve it. The budget, the staff drafted it and we're going to approve it. You need to be more engaged with that. If trustees are focused on a balanced budget rather than actually thinking about, have we invested the money in the right place to do the strategic work we need to do next year, you're probably a type 1 board. And they're an underperforming asset. You've got these amazing people with skills and abilities and willingness, and all you're doing is letting them listen. When you get to type 2 boards, and a lot of boards want to be here, and it's great to be a type 2 board, but in a type 2 board, what winds up happening is you're stuck on today, and you're not thinking about 10 years from now. Now, I'm also smart enough to know, even if you're the most generative board, right now you probably do need to be strategic and very, very fiduciary because of what's happening with public funding. But it doesn't mean you stop thinking about 10 years from now, because we don't want to come out of this period behind because we forgot to also be generative at the same time. When we do strategic work as a board, we really begin to think of ourselves as a partnership with the staff. It's not gotcha, it's not staff didn't do this, it's really, can we do joint problem solving? If we've got a speed bump on the staff side, how do we work on it together rather than say, solve the problem and come back to us? When we're looking at strategic governance, we all accept the responsibility for looking at what is the external environment telling us right now? And how can we respond and react to that? Type 2 boards have committees and task forces structured around strategic issues. So we've abandoned the parallel with the staff structure. You will have a finance committee, you will have an audit committee, you will have a governance committee. You probably don't need any other committees. You need task forces and work groups as the opportunities come up. And again, remember, I don't want you to have development committees, I want you to have teams. When you're in a type 2 board, you tend to rely on analysis rather than thinking about, are we asking the right questions and getting feedback on the right questions? And it's not strategic planning, it's strategic thinking. And strategic thinking requires, I hate that outside the box. I heard a speaker once who said, I want people who think outside the box, but I want them to remember we got a box. So the box is your mission, your call to action. So a state-of-the-art board is a generative board, not a type 2 board, but it's still very much progressing into that trust space where we see ourselves as teams. And when we're developing strategies, we really need to make sure we've identified the right problem. Because oftentimes we see the solution that feels right, and then we frame the problem around the solution we want. We need to make sure we're asking the right question before we aim at our ideal solution. And with type 3 boards, this is really the discerning board, the one that really will frame the question well, confront challenges together, but always rooted in traditions and our values, our beliefs. The type 3 board is making sense out of what we're facing, making meaning out of that, and problem solving. And again, framing the right question so we're solving for the correct problem. When type 1 and type 2 boards ignore generative discernment, we run the risk of solving the wrong problem, addressing the wrong assumptions, and we develop the wrong strategy. So type 3 work, really we have to take a pause and say, what problem are we solving for? So that we're going to execute the correct strategy once we've got that figured out. When we're doing type 3 governance, we are maximizing the input of every board member because everyone's skills and insights and perspectives are wrapped into that. So why would we do this? First of all, it empowers us, it engages us as individuals, it exploits the talent of the board, it enriches the work we do because we come to a meeting, maybe we listen to 20 minutes of pro forma stuff, and then we're either engaged in a learning experience or a generative discussion about a significant issue that we want to deal with. And it enhances our performance as a board and as an organization. If you don't have Chait, Ryan, and Taylor on your bookshelf, once this is over, go to Amazon and buy one. It really is an amazing piece. And as I said, it was published more than 20 years ago. I still think it's one of the best books on comprehensive governance that was ever written. So let's do a bit of a deeper dive here. So when we look at generative governance, we're really looking at the duties of nonprofit boards. Again, determine mission and purpose. Your mission statement, that's your brief call to action. Your vision statement, the long-term picture, if you are totally successful, what is it that you are going to, how's the world going to look? And then thirdly, your values. What are your core beliefs? What are the core values that guide your work and the way you do it? I blended duties 2 and 3, hiring, supporting, and monitoring and evaluating the CEO, making sure you have the most qualified person. And what are the needs you have? How does your CEO, your executive director, bring strengths to the work, but also thinking about the vulnerabilities of your nonprofit, and does the CEO you hire have the capacity to advance that work? You absolutely need a written position description for the CEO that you evaluate every year. It doesn't mean you change it every year, but you make sure it's still right. And I already alluded to the fact that if you need your CEO at more tables in the community, do you have their position description so focused on what's in the building that they can't possibly get out there? So think about that. That's one that often needs to be tweaked. Think about the partnership you have with your executive director, looking at compensation. We lose a lot of amazing people in our sector because we don't have competitive salaries. And I am smart enough to know that that's a challenge, but think about where your salary ranges have to sit in order for you to have the best possible staff. Looking at your annual review and making sure when you deliver that review, the full board is involved in that, but also that you have a trusting, honest, and open relationship. Because you can't do good work together if you don't trust each other. I know many of you who've come to this kind of trustee summit in the past have seen this, but how do you integrate effective planning with mission, vision, and values? All of the external and internal assessments you need to do. Develop your goals for each of your programs and then your action steps. The action steps are where the staff business plan and the board governance plan diverge. Because once your comprehensive strategic plan is developed, the staff takes the management part, the operations part, but the board still has a board governance plan, a board action plan that it's responsible for. When you look at monitoring and strengthening programs and services, again, what are the governance data that you need to make sure the outcomes you're holding yourselves accountable for are being achieved? So evaluating performance and adjusting, not evaluating delivery, but outcomes. And everybody's favorite again, ensuring adequate resources. And this is fundraising, but also operating revenue. Are you maximizing it? Do you have expertise that you could monetize so that you could have operating revenue through a revenue stream you hadn't used in the past? Public funding and government contracts. I'm on a one-woman crusade to never call them government grants. Philanthropic grants, public funding contracts. Get the language different so that when you're talking about we got a grant for, everybody knows it's philanthropy. When we got a contract for, everybody knows it's public funding. They're different revenue streams and they behave very differently. And of course, philanthropy. You can raise money for programs. You can raise money for everybody's favorite overhead, administration and management, and also capital. You don't have to have a capital campaign to have capital funding needs. Those are often major gifts that we raise outside of campaigns. And unless you're balancing all of these revenue streams, you're exposing yourself to risk. I don't know a single board member who says, I take great pride in exposing my nonprofit to risk. But you are if you're overfunded in public funding. And it's hurting some of us right now because we are overexposed in public funding in many cases. And we're like scratching our heads. Why didn't we do development decades ago? Well, because we weren't ready, but now we are. So one of the things we talked about, the 80-20 rule, when you do a philanthropy program, think about what tactics you're using. The most expensive money you raise is the money most of us raise. It's from annual giving. It's from events. It's transactional. It's from the annual appeal. It's from Giving Tuesday. It's from digital campaigns, small gifts, big investment in staff time. If we get to relationship-based fundraising, where we've got the people in the deep end who are happy going off the board with a portfolio of 2 or 3 people they're calling on, we get a lot better outcomes. Many people on boards are significant donors to things. And if you are one of those people, you may be visited by your college major gift officer. And you're scratching your head saying, why do I have to do this? My college calls on me as staff person. Most of you don't have a major gift staff of 50. So if you really want to get going in relationship-based fundraising, those of you who are willing to be in the deep end need to take 2 or 3 names of your own that you are going to be the relationship manager for. And you might wind up taking somebody from the shallow end with you because they're a program expert who could talk about the outcome stories. So if you want to get away from transactional philanthropy, you need to get into relationship-based. And the bridge between transactions and major gifts is often mid-level donors. Donors of $1,000, $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 a year. And that may seem impossible to all of you, or some of you, or any of you, but it's not. But you have to do it with intentionality and a plan. So I want to think about what do donors want from us? They want well-managed organizations who own our future. They do not want pathetic organizations who are whining about diminishing government contracts. They expect to support well-managed organizations with a future path that they have figured out. So don't send appeals this fall and say, our government funding is at risk, we need you to fill in the gap. It's not compelling. All it does is say, we were asleep at the switch, we're overinvested in public funding, and now we're desperate. So think about how do you tell moving stories about the outcomes you create, and you're inviting people to be part of saving lives and changing lives. So please don't send me your appeal that says our government funding was cut and we're desperate, so please send us $25. Especially don't please send us $25, because that's not generous. Raise your sights and add some zeros. So building relationships with us, not sucking up to rich people, honoring the people who invest in our work. So who are you thanking? How are you thanking them? And who's in the room when they're being thanked? Making sure as we look at this and we move into the financial management, being transparent with our donors about what we're doing with their money. So when you're doing your budgeting, when you're doing your reporting, when you're doing all those things, it's not just the IRS you're reporting to. It's also the people that are your investors. You also are, in your finance committee, you're also responsible for internal controls and financial policy. So the finance committee is going to be looking at that annually. And also, what are the administrative policies that you have? Do you have an updated crisis policy, disaster policy, cybersecurity policy? And if you don't, those are things you probably need to be looking at. Also, your insurance and your risk management. That often rests with the finance committee. And I do want to mention the IRS 990 form. I do a lot of board governance work, and every time we do a board governance survey, one of the lowest scoring things is I received and understand the IRS 990 form. Well, of course, they were in the room when it was presented, and they voted yes to accept it, but they don't remember what it is. So make sure that as you're looking at your audit and you're looking at your 990, that people realize this is the thing that's going to show up on GuideStar. I don't know why it's the thing that nobody remembers, but if they're not on the finance committee, they certainly aren't thinking about it. But GuideStar obtains all of our 990s and they make them available. My personal opinion is, why make them go to GuideStar? Be transparent, put it on your own website. I wouldn't put your audit on the website, but I would put the public version of your 990 on the website. So just a thought. And if you've not really thought about your GuideStar rating, get on that. It's not a board responsibility necessarily. If you have the staff bandwidth to do it, please do. But making sure your public face, your GuideStar rating, is something that is as high as it can be, and you're aspiring to get it higher. I promised to talk a little bit more about building a competent board. So this is what your governance committee does. And if you join BoardSource, they have the coolest PDFs that you can use to support the governance committee. Number one, support the board chair in designing and executing the annual board goals, because it's the board chair responsible for that, not the executive director. You're monitoring individual board member performance. Who's showing up? Who's not showing up? If somebody's got a string of non-attendance, you're talking to them about, why is this a challenge for you now? And there may be a good reason, but it may be that they really aren't a good fit. Assessing and evaluating the board as a whole, which feeds right into the question we had earlier. The governance committee is responsible for bylaws and document review. The board position description, the bylaws, all those things that the board signs annually. And the governance committee is responsible for planning onboarding and also periodic board training. Now, the governance committee probably is going to talk to the staff about training needs and potential presenters, but it's the governance committee's job, not the executive director's job, to be mindful of board training. Sometimes governance committee is also responsible for planning an annual board retreat. Not every board does that. Sometimes you'll have a task force to develop a retreat. When you have a nominating committee and a governance committee are not two separate committees. Nominating is a function of the governance committee. So if you've got a nominating committee that's not a governance committee, set your sights on evolving it. If you have both, you've got a bifurcated structure. So blending the nominating work into the governance committee is an appropriate thing. Nominating tracks terms, also recruits non-board members to committees if your board structure allows that. You identify, qualify, cultivate, and nominate the candidates. You maintain officer succession, and sometimes you got a speed bump with that. You can have the best succession plan and things can happen, but think of that. And making sure that board members have a chance to play together from time to time so that they can be social with each other. If you've gotten to the point where you're only doing virtual board members, you're really sabotaging your ability to do that because you're never in the same room at the same time. And if board members aren't doing the work they need to do, and you've trained them up, and they still are standing on the deck, they're not even in the shallow water, you need to have the courage to retire them with dignity. And that's not easy. But which is more important, the mission or the person who you don't have the courage to retire? So legal and ethical integrity, and this is obviously fiduciary. Are you in compliance with everything and can you pay your bills? But making sure that you're abiding by all the applicable laws, regulations, and standards. Things like, are you properly registered with the Bureau of Charities to fundraise in Pennsylvania? If you fundraise in New Jersey, are you registered there? Things like that. And last but not least, your public standing. How are you advocating for your brand and your mission and your work? Do you have an annual report? Are you communicating effectively? Are you having outreach events, not fundraisers, but community engagement events? And are you looking at communication, print and digital, print and digital, print and digital? Because even the youngest donors today read stuff in their mailbox because they don't get any cool mail. So if you're trying to get your budget to be 100% digital, you're sabotaging yourself. So if you're looking at a board position description, in my opinion, these are the sections that need to be in there. The overview of the board, which is the introduction. Then what are the roles of the board? And how do the controlling documents will inform what statements you need to have in there. But the duties and responsibilities are things like your strategy and mission, your board structure and development, what committee responsibilities they have, what attendance responsibilities do you have, how do you talk about CEO oversight, what is your finance and risk management duty as a board member, and what are you responsible for philanthropically? I don't want you to have a minimum gift for each board member. I want you to say every board member is expected to make a gift that is generative relative to his, her, or their means, and that indicates their leadership position as a director, because that's individual for every person. And then they sign and date it annually. So how do these all fit together? So the 10 responsibilities of nonprofit boards are on the left. The duties are on the right. So some of them are in more than one category. And the governance is leadership mode. When you're doing effective planning, number 4, it's the duty of care, and you're in the strategic and generative space. So you can see if you're doing all the duties, all the legal duties, you've got to be doing all of the 10 nonprofit responsibilities as Board Source defines them, and you're hitting all of the governance's leadership modes. But if you begin to think about it in taking all of the models, it begins to make a different kind of sense. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. So as we look at how the board then does its work, you think differently about the way you approach your work. And if every decision has a generative component, you're making sure you're focused on the right question. And the budget example is, of course, not just passing a balanced budget, but passing a budget that is focused on the strategic work of the organization. So it may require a completely different look at how you do what you do. And as you look at it, generative thinking, what are the alternate hypotheses that we could have? If you've got an end in mind, you probably haven't thought about all of the alternatives. So thinking about how you frame opportunities, how you have robust discussion. And if you've got a consent agenda, you've got all this time to have that robust discussion. Sometimes you need to have a completely separate meeting to talk about something really significant, and that's okay. But every board meeting is more like a retreat because you're having a thorough, engaged, robust conversation about whatever the challenge is. And the board becomes a very strong asset. And you're also fluid enough to know if we've got to snap back to fiduciary, we're going to do that. So as you look at the relationship then between your amazing staff and your highly motivated board, you really have a trusting relationship that's based on the leadership of the board and that the group is a community of learners. You're relying on board members as resources, not just their technical expertise. And it doesn't mean you're abdicating responsibility. What it does mean, if you're driving down a lane on let's pretend we're on the Schuylkill, everybody's favorite thing to hate. Sometimes you're in the fast lane, sometimes you're in the slower lane, sometimes you're in the breakdown lane. But you can see the other cars. We're not in silos, we're in lanes. So as you look at that, you're really considering the fact that sometimes we're going the same speed, side by side. Sometimes one of us is behind the other. Sometimes one of us is in the breakdown lane and we need to move over and take care of each other. But that becomes part of this. So we really need to look at collaboration, not division of labor. And as you work collaboratively to do this, the CEO, the executive director, works jointly with the board to make sure that you have the kind of work you really need to do and want to do, and you've arrived at the right conversations. So when we think about maximizing different ways of thinking, you're not going to do this in a week. You're not going to go back to your board next week or next month and say, I learned this new style of how we're going to work and we're going to be totally generative. You've got to have a glide path to this. And in my opinion, it's going to take, if you're a fiduciary board today, it's going to take you maybe up to 3 years to get to fully generative. If you're a really solid strategic board, maybe 18 months. Because you need to give people time to get comfortable with this and to begin to really think about what lane are we in and do I want to be in that lane? Because sometimes this kind of change, people will opt out of a board and they can do that. Let them stand down with dignity. So the big picture is thinking about what lane you're in and what's the CEO's and the staff's lane and what is the board's lane. But we can see each other and you're constantly thinking about what the other group is doing. The life stage of your organization also matters because if you're in a very emergent stage, a transition, a growth stage, fiduciary may be the most important thing for you to do. You can also rotate through. So organizations that are very mature and very sophisticated, if you've got a board chair change or if you've got a CEO change, you may need to do some fiduciary work in that transition. So again, the life cycle, the age of your organization and the life cycle really make a difference. And it's not good or better or best. It's where are we today and where do we need to be? So I promised a couple of worksheets. And each of your facilitators has a worksheet called a Board Governance Quick Check. And my watch says it's 25 after. And what I want you to do with the worksheet is take a look at it and if you're willing, choose where your board is today and then score it. We're not collecting these. All right, so any comments, feedback, pushback? We're going to use it. It's the worst thing I ever saw in my life. We're better than I thought. We're worse than we thought. Anything at all? Reflections, comments? Yes. Oh, and I've got the mic.
I'm Renee Cassidy with the Chester County Suicide Prevention Partnership, and I would suggest that for all of these, we are not doing any of them because we are so new that we are literally trying to generate the documents to do these things. And it's a real struggle to get us off on the right foot.
But we talked about life stage, didn't we? So you're at the infancy. Yeah, well, they're in utero, perhaps. But seriously, life stage is always a variable. But now you've got a roadmap.
My lollipop. Marisol Perez from the girls, the Fund for Women and Girls. What we found out is that we are not an A, B, or C. We can be an A+, but a C-, or a B++, which is almost an A. So it was, I wouldn't say hard, but it was, it's not like a clear an A, B, or C for us.
Well, and I think that's an interesting one, because if you do it with your full board, you may find that people see the work of the board differently. And that's okay. That's okay. But if you think about, yeah, we know the legal stuff. Yeah, we read the board source stuff. Are we really being generative whenever we can? Because generative is, what is our sector going to need from us 10 years from now? And how do we do the work of today with excellence, keeping our eye on the future? And you can still be generative today, even though it may feel harder. But when we come out of this period, we're going to need to be excellent and relevant. And if you're not being generative, you're going to be behind. You're going to be behind. I promised a second worksheet. And the second worksheet is everybody's favorite work. So, fundraising. And we're all smart enough to know it can be the most significant speed bump. So, what I've given you is a list of 25 tactics that nonprofits can use to elevate their donor experience and their fundraising. So, in the time we have left, I don't want you necessarily to go through each of the columns. If you want to, circle the number that you believe your organization is using today. Then go back through and on the worksheet where you've got in the instructions, put a check mark next to each of the tactics you think your organization should start using, but you're willing to admit it takes more bandwidth. It might take more staff. It might take different tools. So if you as a board member are saying, yeah, we need to move in that direction, how are you as a board member going to find the resources to allow that work to happen? And then thirdly, my favorite, put a star next to the ones you're willing to do some heavy lifting for. So again, don't necessarily have to do all three columns. Just think about the ones you're currently doing, but then check next to the ones you are convinced you need to move into next that require more bandwidth. And then the star, the most important ones, what are the ones you're willing to do some heavy lifting for? And we have another 15 minutes. We'll come back together at 5 after. So, I'm wondering what you decided to take on. So here's my first question. How many of you put a circle, in other words, you're doing the things, on all 25? I heard a chortle beside me. How many of you put a circle on 20? Anybody for 15? We got a 15? I think we got a 15. Put your hands up tall. Are you from the same organization or different organization? Okay. So we have 2 organizations that are doing 15. How about 10? Five. Between 5 and 10? We got some. These are the transactional ones that help you bridge into mid-level gifts. I'm curious some of your reactions to these, but also I'm curious which ones you put stars next to that you were willing to take on. Is anybody willing to share one or two of your stars? Okay, we got.
Hi, my name is Danny Murphy. I am from Uptown Knauer Performing Arts Center. We decided to put our emphasis into storytelling with real people, especially because of our performing arts background with Uptown. We have the opportunity to share something very personal, especially because all of our donors have some sort of stake in performing arts in some capacity. And tying everything back to our mission, where now we have bandwidth in order to get our story out there, create more peer-to-peer connections. So that is where we personally chose to put our emphasis.
Yay. Storytelling, it's branding. It's the part that can be expensive if you have staff doing it. And if you as board members are willing to figure out a way to do that consistently over time, your messaging is amazing. You said an interesting thing about, we know all of our donors have some stake in the performing arts. And I don't mean to be argumentative, but are you sure? I'm very serious.
Well, I'm saying our board members specifically. And
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
yeah, and looking at, we also have a studio program where, you know, we see the direct impact of the children in the community that we're able to positively impact, and using those stories to then drive further membership and further community building within our organization.
Thank you. I think one of the risks is believing that donors have a particular motivation without the bandwidth to research the donor's motivation. And we have another comment.
That's a good point. Maybe I'll just be quiet. We are engaging right now in
research for donors.
quite a bit of market research for donors, as Heather is saying. But I also was thinking, you know, we have some donors, for example, to back up Danny's point, I think that never even come to the theater, right?
Exactly.
They think that it is just important to have a theater.
Precisely.
In the community, that's a space for all, whether they are truly engaged with the arts themselves or not.
Thank you. And we do have to be careful with assuming what motivates people, because what motivates us and what motivates other people can be two entirely different things.
They wanted to know if you're a member, Robbe.
No, I'm not. I was.
Go get her.
I was. And somehow I fell off the renewal cycle. And it's been a while. I have no doubt he is, and he
Danny's
knows my
new.
phone number and my email. But I have an interesting story, and I grew up in a family that never went in a theater. We never went in a theater, we never went in a museum. I decided about 35 years ago, I was so boring, that I decided I would get a subscription to People's Light. And I did. And I went to this stuff, and I wasn't smart enough to understand it. Well, that was my take on it. And then I began to realize not everyone who loves theater loves everything they see. And I was never a donor to People's Light. And my daughter has a PhD in choral music. I spawned an artist. How, I don't know. I played the flute in the marching band, and I sing in the Westminster Choir, but you know, I'm not like her. So where does she find her muse? In part, People's Light Project Discovery. So they would call me every year to ask me to be a donor, and I would say, no, thank you. One year they called me and asked me to support Project Discovery. And I said yes. This is at the dawn of time, because their development office is amazing now. But to this day, they don't ask me to renew for Project Discovery. And that's the only reason I became a donor in the first place. Now I do it because I know it's important and all that stuff. And plus I have a little bit more money since she's done with school. But the thing's fascinating. Would you, if I had said no for like 5 or 6 years and suddenly they asked me for a restricted gift for Project Discovery and I said yes, that's important. But that takes bandwidth to track that. And it's entirely possible they didn't have the bandwidth at the time. But I haven't abandoned them. So another insight somebody want to share or a star you're willing to do? Yes.
Oh, I want to see Stephanie run.
Thanks. Just based on what you said about storytelling, I love events like this for sharing resources. I'm reading a book right now, which some of you may have already known about. It's called Stories That Stick. And it is Kendra Hall is the author. Somebody recommended it, just grabbed it. And it's not a nonprofit specific book. It's just a business book in general, but it talks about the 4 different kinds of stories that you should kind of have in your back pocket for different purposes. And I find it to be a great resource. So I just wanted to share a book. I don't get any kickbacks from it, but it's been great.
Yeah, and I don't from Chait, Ryan, and Taylor either. I'm just a disciple for them. Anybody else? Well, you've got a punch list now. Oh, we have another one. Thank you.
Eric Lean, Chester County Food Bank. The favorite thing in fundraising for me is to make thank you calls. Now, I'm representing the food bank, which is the core support for all of the county's pantries. So we have a message to give, and the first time I reach someone and I say, I'm calling to thank you for a gift, I work with the volunteer with Chester County Food Bank, I get the most amazing response. It's because we have a story, we have a focus, it's a pretty easy sell, but it's something that I love to do. So that's my star activity.
And every single person on the deck or in the shallow end can make thank you calls. And if they can't do that, the soul searching about how important is this mission to me is perhaps something they need to think about. But also, they may be nervous about a script. So write them one. And you also have to be careful they don't go rogue and start giving I'm very serious. Giving information that they shouldn't give about stuff they shouldn't be talking about. So that's another part of the training. But now you've got an action plan. You've got the skeletal outlines of an action plan. And if you have staff, I would invite you to ask them what they think they're fully implementing right now. Because their list of what they're doing and your list of what you think they're doing could be different. And remember we talked about working in partnership with each other? When you're creating an action plan and adding bandwidth, they will have opinions about what tools and resources they need next. And also the sequencing of doing all these things. You can be a relationship manager even if what you're doing is the thanking piece, not the asking piece. So I would think about, and it's always, we've always done it that way. Well, we've always done that way is never good enough. It's never good enough. Even if you had circled all 25 as things you're doing, you need to keep them fresh. You need to keep evolving them. So creating an action plan is your homework. So these points, radical transparency, transparent about what your organization is doing and how you're doing it. It should be ethical leadership. That's a typo of epic proportion. Ditching the donor mystique. Donors are not these people who you absolutely need to be terrified of. They are lovely, wonderful people who care about the work you do or they wouldn't be donating to you. And calling them and talking to them is a wonderful thing. Some of them won't want to participate in cultivation activities, and that's okay. That doesn't mean they hate you. It just means they want to roll differently. Treat your donors like partners. and prioritize meaningful conversations. My favorite question to ask someone I don't know at all is, when you decided to make your gift to us, what made you decide to choose us? And then shut up and let them tell you. Because it might be very different than what you think. Storytelling, we've talked about storytelling. Be bold about what you need. Not about why you need it, not because our government contract got cut. But be bold about what you need. Respect them as individuals. Sometimes you've got a donor who wants to do something you're not going to do. Be honest about that. Help them find somebody else to give that gift to. And perhaps help them reframe their thinking, but don't do a cram down and be mean. Not everybody's going to want to do what you want them to do. Get rid of all the fundraising stereotypes and myths. There are so many bad ways to raise money. Do it the good ways, and you'll be much more successful. And if you've got an event shop where you are reliant on your event, and if you're over-reliant on public funding contracts, think about how to evolve into the philanthropy space as fast as you can. But you can't do it quickly. You have to do it deliberately and methodically. And I would also say, don't start something you're not willing to sustain. Because then, if you stop it, you're taking away the engagement with the individual, and they won't feel the love anymore, because you're trying to create joyful experiences for the donors. So whether you're working on your governance modes or you're working on creating a philanthropy action plan, I love this because, of course, the Lincoln Building and the Community Foundation. But don't backslide. Take pauses every once in a while. And I truly believe transforming a board takes 3 years. A year for the board to understand it and approve the action plan. A year for you to give everybody the training they need. And a year for people to figure out they're going to do that work. And if they aren't, you invite them to stand down with dignity, because they're holding back the mission that's more important to you than anything else. And like I said, he can find me because my name and phone number are in the slides. I am extraordinarily grateful for your participation this evening. I hope you will find the worksheets useful back in your own shops. And if you haven't already ordered Chait, Ryan, and Taylor, we already found it once this evening on Amazon. I know it's still there. But I think it's a very useful tool, but be very intentional about creating a plan with the right kind of incremental implementation so that you can take everyone along with you. Because the work we do is too important to the people we serve. And I know you're doing a great job. I hope you find this gives you a chance to do it even better. And I look forward to hearing about your success. And I want to thank Karen again for the invitation she extended to me to share this evening with you. So thank you very much.